Hello, Year 12 and any A-levelers who are studying the road to independence, India. I'm here in London, specifically I'm in Parliament Square, looking at the Houses of Parliament behind me, but actually my place of interest is the man behind me, Mahatma Gandhi. We're just going to go through today, have a little walk through London to see some of the sites associated with him. He came to London quite a bit. He lived here in his youth and then he visited, perhaps also in the height of his fame. We'll have a look at that. Plus, also, I'm just going to look at a couple of sites associated with two more people who are important to our course. So come along with me and hope this encourages you to come up to London and see the sites associated with Gandhi and others from our India course. I am outside 20 Barons Court Road, which on the 4th of November 1888 Mohandas K. Gandhi, a 19-year-old Mohandas K. Gandhi, was living. He had just arrived at the Tilbury docks after a 7-week boat trip from India, and apparently didn't talk to many people on the boat, and he was very, very shy. And he'd promised his mother that he would, when he came to London, he would not touch wine, meat, or women. And the landlady here was a lady called Elizabeth Turner. She had actually been to India, so she knew a little bit, but she really did struggle to provide Mohandas with the diet that he required for the meals. I think the vegetarian element was a bit difficult in 1890s London, but she did recommend a few vegetarian restaurants nearer to where he worked, the Inner Temple, where we'll go to soon. By all accounts, he at first tried to ingratiate himself in British life. He took dancing lessons, he learnt French, he took elocution lessons, but I think he found these very uncomfortable and in the end just dedicated his time to studying at the Inner Temple. Now, the main reason Gandhi came to London was to train and to study to become a lawyer, and he came here to the Inns at Court around Temple Tube Station, specifically this part called the Inner Temple. I have the Inner Temple Hall behind me, and that other building directly behind me now is the Inner Temple Library, where Gandhi spent a lot of time studying and learning the ways of becoming a lawyer. Now, when he first came to London, he was incredibly shy, very silent in his approach, didn't really interact with many people, and actually not great traits. To become a lawyer, you need to be quite verbose and eloquent, etc. And also not very much different to what his next life and his future and the history of Gandhi is going to be. A man who made amazingly rousing speeches. So he learned something here, I think, in a temple to do. I think perhaps probably the biggest thing he learned was when he joined the Vegetarian Society, which is on Fleet Street, just behind Inner Temple there, where he became more and more confident. Unfortunately, many of the buildings that Gandhi would have experienced in his time here were destroyed in the Second World War by the Luftwaffe. But he took his skills that he learnt here as a lawyer and the confidence that he got from being spokesman for the Vegetarian Society and took them at first to South Africa, where he defended the rights of Indians in South Africa, and then, of course, used it more and more as he progressed his way through Indian independence. And the next time he came to London after studying here in the 1890s was for the Round Table Conferences. Now, if you'd like to see something tangible of Gandhi's here in London, I would recommend coming here to the British Library to see a letter that Gandhi wrote to the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, in 1930. Gandhi had been imprisoned in Yerevda prison with his civil disobedience campaign that was sweeping across India, and he was quite, if you go and have a look, some of the message I think is polite, typical Gandhi, but it's also very persistent and very demanding that Irwin and the British give in to their demands. He says, India will not be coerced. It cannot be England's dominion forever. These letters actually started off a bit of a contretemps, a bit of a communication between Irwin and Gandhi, which eventually led to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, which saw 90,000 political prisoners released. Irwin promised a vague promise of Dominion status, but also it promised that there would be a round table conference held here in London, for which Gandhi would attend. Just a side note, you should really visit the British Library's treasure section. It's got all sorts of things, from Gutenberg's Bibles to Beatles lyrics written on toilet paper to Shakespeare's First Folio to, of course, the Magna Carta. So when you're going to see Gandhi's and Owen's letter, have a look at everything else there. It is fabulous. In 1931, Gandhi made his way to London again, this time at the height of his fame and his power. He came for the round table conferences to try and find a solution to India's home rule and to come to London to represent what he felt were all Hindus to the British government. And when he came here, he decided he didn't want to stay in posh hotels near Westminster or in a posh person's house in the west of London. He wanted to live amongst the people, the working class people of London, of Britain. So he came here to Bow in East London, and specifically to this building, Kingsley Hall. It was that new building at the time, only built in 1927, and he came and stayed here amongst the working classes of London, here in the East End. And he was hugely popular. Huge crowds would come around here, and he would go and visit people. He'd go and have lunch and have dinner in people's houses, etc. He would walk along the canal just around the back there. And he also would make speeches at this very balcony. Gandhi stood on this balcony, made speeches and talks and various things to the people. He had a room right on the top floor, and occasionally it is said that when the weather was good, he would actually sleep on the roof. I don't know how validated that is, but there is a little museum up there that's occasionally open. As I say, he was hugely popular in his time here in England. He went off to Manchester as well to visit the people who worked in the cotton mills, weaving the cotton that was grown in India at the time. And he would do walks around here and really became a popular sensation, appearing on news videos, Pathé News and newspapers. But it was here at Kingsley Hall, which you can still go and visit today, that he made his home. And he was here for nearly 12 weeks. Behind me is St James's Palace, and in September of 1931, Gandhi came and arrived here for the second round table conference. He came from the East End, where we've just been, to come along to this conference. Now, the first round table conference had been a bit of a bust. The second one, was certainly better represented. Congress decided to come along, but Gandhi wanted to make sure that he was the sole representative of Congress, or certainly the main representative of Congress. He also wanted to represent all Hindus, and he objected to the fact that Dr. Ambedkar was here representing the untouchables. Gandhi felt that he could represent them. And so that's part of the issue with the roundtable conferences. There was arguing amongst themselves. I think the British perhaps knew this and they were cynical, but the key thing about Britain is that it was a new government. Ramsay MacDonald, the new national government leader, had just come into office 2 weeks earlier, and also Britain was facing a financial crisis. So they were very much distracted and were not willing or perhaps able to offer India and Gandhi anything. So Gandhi came back really after 3 months of long negotiations, not really with much promise. I think he showed his colours on his disapproval of separate electorates and highlighted bickering between all the main parties. But perhaps it's symbolic to say they all got together in a room and discussed, and they were able to do it in Britain. So progress perhaps, but tiny progress came from this. So this whole big trip that Gandhi came to Britain. A brief little trip from our Gandhi in London tour takes us here to sunny Gypsy Hill, specifically to the house behind me. Behind the skip and behind the bougainvillea and overgrowth is a blue plaque to a woman called Annie Besant, who's quite an integral part of our history course, actually. She was a philanthropist and a philosopher here in London and in Britain for a long time. In the late 19th century, took part in strikes and was just there to support the poorer people in society. She took a great interest in India and indeed moved out there at the turn of the 20th century. And by the time the First World War, actually had risen the ranks of the Indian National Congress Party to become the leader, the president of the Indian National Congress, and set up the Home Rule Leagues. Before the preeminence of Gandhi and Nehru, Annie Besant was there. She's got quite a significant history and a legacy, really. Some people might view her as a sort of white saviour, a British person coming over to push for Indian home rule. But at the same time, she could easily be seen as the person who laid the foundations which Gandhi and Nehru and others led to. But she lived here in Gypsy Hill in southwest London. So there we have it, Gandhi in London. I'm not sure what Gandhi took away with him from being in London. He certainly, the idea of being a vegetarian, because he wasn't a big fan of the English food here, cooked by his landlady and provided for him at Middle Temple. I wonder as well, perhaps, if he was associated London with disappointment. Disappointment with his early life here, with the conditions for the normal people, but also perhaps a disappointment from his time here for the Round Table Conference, where nothing really came there for him. But maybe it was definitive, I don't know, but that perhaps fueled his anti-imperialism, anti-British imperialism in particular. And also, I hope you enjoyed that little sojourn to see the life and times of Annie Besant. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please do tune in for another one, and don't forget to subscribe. See you later.